Hi all, it's Emily with ESPN Esports, and today we are here to discuss a very hot topic in the LCS free agency offseason. We are going to discuss North American talent, and more specifically, North American mid-lane talent. Joining me is Tyler Erzberger. First of all, Tyler, the thing I kind of want to jump off into this discussion is, why are we specifically talking about North American talent? What happened this year to make this such a huge issue, even before the offseason started?
I obviously think the moves in the offseason obviously, spotlighted the lack of NA talent, especially in the mid lane. But it's been a thing that's been going on for years. I mean, going into the 2020 season, the only NA-born mid laner is Golden Glue on the Golden Guardians. But before that, I believe 2 years ago, the only starting mid laner was Pole Belter. And I don't think it was the biggest issue back then because it was who else was there? Hai was recently retired. There wasn't really any players that, could step up and be a starter. There wasn't any players that, people could actually believe in.
So for me, I think the talent discussion is part of a broader discussion that started when TL it's kind of interesting, right? Yeah. Because people didn't start talking about this when C9 didn't get out of their group. They didn't start talking about it when Clutch didn't get out of their group, which makes sense because, let's be real, Clutch was in the most difficult group
of all time
at Worlds, and no offense to them, they were a younger team. They weren't expected to get out.
They were better than C9.
I think they ended up acquitting themselves really well. I think they presented themselves really well. I have no complaints about Clutch. I mean, they had a very formidable competition in that group.
Almost beat Fnatic.
So no one was talking about that. They almost beat Fnatic twice. Those are some
very close games. They should have won.
They really
should have won both of those. So.
They're burned into my brain for forever. But I think the big thing that happened was Team Liquid didn't make it out, right? And this is a team that was on top of North America for a while. It's a team that has multiple players who are not domestic players from North America. But they didn't make it out, and suddenly NA sucks. This is terrible. I always think it's interesting to touch on how Worlds rewrites the narrative for the rest of the year, because if you actually think about it, North America's performance, not that bad. No. MSI final for TL. You can chalk that up to Invictus Gaming mental booming, but if you're looking at North America's finish, it was really defined by Team Liquid's failure at Worlds. And then suddenly people are like, why is NA terrible? And the answer that a lot of people arrived at is that they don't invest in their own domestic talent. So Scouting Grounds happens less than a week later. I actually flew from Paris. Within less than 24 hours of landing in LA was at Scouting Grounds. I think the big discussion this offseason has been, how do we develop our own talent? Is this the year that we see North American teams try to invest in their own talent a little bit more, even though it's going to take a lot more effort because our solo queue ladder isn't as good, and all of these other issues that are inherent to North America that I won't go over. It's a very nuanced topic. And that is not what happened, because to your point, we saw a lot more investment in talent outside of North America than within. And then typically, as it has been with past off seasons, it's been finding places for that domestic talent to slot in around the imported players that they're bringing in. So mid lane specifically has been the position that North American teams kind of absolutely refuse to rely on domestic talent for. Why do you think mid lane specifically is something that North American orgs really refuse to use their own talent for?
It's such a difficult question, because I think in a similar fashion, I think top lane was also kind of that way a few years ago. We had Dyrus, Darshan, but then there was also, we just imported all the South Korean top laners. And I think with Licorice, and we see Hanser, and we're seeing more, top lane.
Niles is really talented.
Kumo
is going to be
Fake
starting.
God. I think top lanes finally people are starting to be like, oh yeah, NA can, actually produce good top lane talent. I think mid lane, obviously, it's the kind of the heartbeat of the team, kind of the soul, kind of the talisman of the team a lot of times, and you'd want that to also kind of be one of your star players. You don't necessarily want them to be a role player a lot of the time, so I think teams are going out for that big import player, and I think importing isn't bad. I don't think importing should be like, oh, you should never import it, but I think there's a difference between a good import and a bad import play. I think there's two, like Core JJ, an amazing pickup. You're picking up one of the best supports in their prime and bringing in the North America who speaks, fluid English, and we saw what happened. Him and Doublelift created maybe the best bomb lane in the West, along with Perks and Mickey X. And then there's other, import ideas where you're just trying to keep above. Not
going to call anyone out there, are you?
No. I mean, we could talk about that in a little bit, but I think the problem with NA right now is that 9 out of the 10 teams would rather finish 6th place and get blown out in the first round of the playoffs than sack a season, finish 9th or 10th, and develop talent. I think everyone but Golden Guardians think in their mind, we're making at least playoffs. Like, we're going to make playoffs this year, at least 6th place. With what they did in the offseason, with how much money they spent, with what the players they got, they're looking towards the results now. Where Golden Guardians, they have Golden Glue, they have Keith as support. Like, that wild thing. Like, we're going to take our, sub 80 carry and make him a support. Closer, a young, very up-and-coming talent coming over from Turkey. Hanser, that veteran, stalwart top laner. And I think Golden Guardians are being like, okay, we're going to experiment. We're going to have fun for the spring. Like, if Keith turns out to be a really good support, then woo, that's great. If Golden Glue shows that he can, transfer scrim results into the big stage and kind of take over that Cloud, like, he had, some good performances with Cloud9. He beat Bjergsen in a playoff series. So Golden Glue can show up. So Golden Guardians is looking towards the future, where I think the other 9 teams were like, we would much rather finish 6th, get blown out in the playoffs, than, try to develop talent. And I think that's the pitfall of North America.